naming the demons. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" Some of you may have noticed on Facebook this week, I published the names and the ages of the victims of the shooting in Orlando, Florida, a week ago today. In the heading I wrote, "Real people with real names, real families, and real lives." In just a little bit, we will speak and pray those names out loud as we remember not only the victims, but their families and friends. This week, an entire country, I would even say the world over, has been in mourning over this tragic event. There was a huge gathering in the Brandenburg Gate yesterday, over 1,000 people in Berlin to remember the victims. Something which should make all of us ponder, think, and reflect. Not just today, not just this week, but for a very long time to come. David Goucher, a Christian ethics professor at Mercer University, wrote on religious news this week, "As a Christian parent, concerned for the next generation of our youth growing up in our country," he writes, "Multiple reports are surfacing that Pulse nightclub shooter Omar Mateen's profile was found on gay dating apps, that he had tried to pick up men, and that on prior occasions he had patronized the Orlando club in which he massacred so many on Sunday, the 12th of June. If this is true, this matters a very great deal to us, because it might move the motivation from a teen's horrific act to a very different and psychologically more complex place in which one man's inability to reconcile himself with his sexuality cost 49 other people their lives and then cost them his own life. The official report coming out this week confirms that this was the major motivation of the attack, not Islam extremism. All this opens up the broader issue of the severe mental health challenges facing young people who discover, against the stern teachings of their religious traditions, that they are attracted to members of the same sex. This intersection of religious authority and forbidden sexuality is a very dangerous one, and it must be navigated by all who are raised in religions that reject same-sex attractions and relationships. It is a problem in multiple religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The leaders in all religious traditions face the urgent responsibility to address it." End quote. As an Episcopal church, we have been grappling with this issue for a number of decades. There is still a huge amount of division over this issue, especially on a global level. Yet as a national church, we seem to be far ahead of many religious denominations in the discussion, because we have opted to not have all the answers, just to love those who are different, and try to understand who they are and what they need. Instead of a label, we prefer a name, a face, a relationship. We prefer to invite others to our communities and to be themselves, without shame, without guilt. We prefer to seek unity, not division. This brings us to today's powerful gospel passage, where Jesus exorcises a man who is tormented by demons. Not just one, but a legion of demons. It brings to mind the heart and soul of the man who brought about this horrible tragedy that came about 1 week ago. He too was filled and tormented with demons. It was not just one issue, one concern that brought him to pull that trigger a week ago today, but many. It is evident that Ovar Mateen was a very, very troubled young man since his early age. There were many voices that brought him to that moment of violent engagement with other human lives. Saying that he was possessed by a demon, of course, would be too simplistic of an answer. But what happened? What happens to us when we are so divided within ourselves? Horrible things can happen. Biblical scholar Jeffrey Johns nicely sums up a key insight into this story we hear today when he says, this miracle story is not just about a personal exorcism. It is about the promise of God's ability to defeat and reorder the disordered powers that afflict individuals and communities. Jesus, in his active act of naming the demon, of engaging with the human being, and acting in favor of the poor possessed person, brings order out of the disorder of this poor man's life. He brings the man back to peace and tranquility. We hear. Then people came out to see what had happened, and they came to see Jesus, and they found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. Naming, engaging, and acting are the 3 Ds that Jesus does in order to bring order out of chaos in this existence of this poor man possessed by a legion of maladies. This is an important key to our process of healing and moving forward as a country, and for our communities as we face the horror of last week. Naming the demons. We as communities must face our own demons also. These things which divide us and seek solutions. Our differences, religious, ethical, cultural, are destroying us from within. We must give a name to these as Jesus did. Names such as homophobia, hate, extremism, intolerance, violence, gun-related violence, mental health. These are all key pieces to the solution of finding healing and unity. They're not easy to deal with, but we must find calm and reasonable ways to talk about the issues which push all of our buttons. This at least must be done at a local level, here in our homes and in our churches. Engaging. Secondly, we have to begin to engage with each other as human beings, no matter what our differences. This we can begin to do right here and right now. What about that person who sits in the other pew that I say hello to but do not even know his or her name? What about the neighbor who lives next to me that I never engage in a conversation because they seem to be of another culture or religion or ethnic group? What about the people I just meet casually in my daily activities but refuse to offer them a smile, a kind word, something they can take home with them and feel a little more connected to other human beings in this big, impersonal city? What about striking up a conversation with someone who is evidently different from me, by age, by race, by religion, or social status? We must all begin to break down the many barriers that divide us. I'm especially aware, for example, when I go into a gasoline station, there's one just by my house, that are frequently run by people from the Middle East. I try to be more friendly and gentle with them than I would someone that I were more familiar with. Not because I'm afraid, but because I want to make a human connection with those who are different from me. This was so when I lived in New York City, and many of the small local stores were run by Arabs or people from the Middle East. We all became very much connected to each other after daily visitations and transactions. And finally, acting. Real change comes about when we change our attitudes, our hearts, our understanding. That happens when people are rightly educated, taught, have used their divine gift of reason, and are open and willing to be more than they are. We begin to change our minds and our hearts, and then we begin to behave differently. Fear, as we have seen even in today's lesson, only keep us from moving forward. As painful as it has been to live through this tragedy, it is my hope and prayer that many lives will be changed after this week. Many hearts opened and convinced that all have much more in common as human beings than that which divides us. We have seen, sadly, this week that our divisions are real, not fictitious, and they have real and sad consequences, even tragic ones. Divisions of culture, of religion, of sexuality, of gender, and political parties are the real legion of demons attacking us today. They are destructive, and they are damaging to us as a society, as a country, and even as a human race. But there are real answers, and there are real solutions to these divisions. That's why we come to church. The story of exorcism, the Gerazini Dimionic, speaks to Jesus' power and authority to liberate the world from oppression and chaos. Jesus comes into our midst today to bring sanity, calm, and order out of our chaos and division. This week I received a letter from one of my late parishioners when I was working in Minnesota in a church I founded called in Santo Niño Jesus. This was almost 20 years ago. Anita and her husband are from Ecuador, and they now live in Texas. Their son, whom I knew as a little boy when I was their priest, is now a young man living in Denver. Luis is gay, and his parents shared that with me the last time that they visited me here in Los Angeles. This week I got a letter from Luis's mother, Anita, asking me advice as a worried mother, and I share some of her story. She wrote me, "Through Elias's Facebook, I've been reading your postings regarding the tragic events in Orlando, and we both felt so sad that this has happened. In a much lesser scale, something happened to our son Luis on Saturday. He was out with friends, and a woman stabbed him with a pen in his neck because he is gay. He only has a scratch," he says, "but he did get scared. And since in Denver, where he lives, this coming Sunday is Gay Pride Festival, he told his sisters that he is afraid to go to that event. On the other hand, he also said that he felt community support, because when this incident happened to him, not only his friends, but complete strangers that saw the incident defended him, and he felt good about that. Then later that night, the news informed him of the Orlando attack." This is the harsh world that we live in, my friends. My nephew Michael, who this weekend will be accompanied by his mom, my sister, to the Gay Pride event in Minneapolis out of fear for his safety. Luis, my parishioner's son, and the list goes on. As we remember the names of those who lost their lives a week ago today, think of them as they were. Real people with real names, real families,